from Mississippi, and I believe that the outstanding question still remains over the actual value of the Behavioral Detection Officer BDO program, which has yet to be sufficiently validated by TSA. In addition, it's my understanding that a recent OIG report may validate the concerns Mr. Thompson has raised about the program. In the report accompanying this bill, this committee also articulated some of the same concerns of Mr. Thompson, including whether passengers are screened in an objective and cost-effective manner. However, I cannot accept this amendment at this time to zero out the program. I remain hopeful that TSA will correct these issues, and my colleague, Chairman Mr. McCall, has also said he is also hopeful that we can correct these programs. I will be willing to work with Mr. Thompson and Mr. McCall and anyone else who has concerns about this to make sure that this program is effectively administered and effectively worked. So at this time, I oppose the amendment.
The gentleman yields back his time. What purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina rise?
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last words.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I rise in reluctant opposition to the amendment as well. I do this because I have great respect for the gentleman from Mississippi and for the good work he does on the authorizing committee, and I also know that the concerns he's expressed here tonight are legitimate ones. But I believe striking this funding in an appropriations bill is not the preferred way to deal with it. The Behavior Detection Office program utilizes specially trained individuals to identify potentially high-risk passengers. This program is specifically designed to detect individuals exhibiting behaviors that indicate they may be a threat to our security. And these behaviors, by the way, are not just randomly chosen. These individuals are trained in psychologically grounded theories as to what kind of behaviors they're looking for and what those behaviors may indicate. It's one element of a layered approach to ensuring the security of our commercial airlines and airports. Now, I'm aware that the Inspector General will soon issue a report that faults TSA for being unable to accurately assess the effectiveness of the program and for not having a finalized strategic plan that identifies the mission, the goals, and the objectives needed to develop performance measures. My understanding, however, is that TSA has agreed with all of these recommendations made by the Inspector General to improve the program and plans to address them right away. I also understand that TSA has already drafted a strategic plan for the program. Ending a program at the Department of Homeland Security just because the Inspector General has found that it needs to improve its strategy and its performance measures just doesn't make sense to me. The Inspector General certainly has not recommended that the program be ended. The use of behavior detection is not a new or novel idea, and as I say, in fact, it has a validated foundation in psychology. It's been a cornerstone of the Israeli government's aviation security for years. I commend Administrator Pistole for his understanding of the possibilities and limitations of behavior detection and his attempts to use it effectively. We don't need to end this program. We need to work with TSA and push it to quickly implement the IG's recommendation. So I urge defeat of the amendment and yield back.
Gentleman yields back. What purpose does the gentleman from Arizona rise?
Have an amendment at the desk.
Currently an amendment pending for the chair. Question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Mississippi. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to.
Mr. Chairman, on that I ask for a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Mississippi will be postponed. What purpose does the gentleman from Arizona rise?
I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Salmon of Arizona. At the end of the bill, before the short title, insert the following section. None of the funds made available by this act may be used in contravention of Section 642A of the Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act of 1996, 8 United States Code 1373A.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I might add that this amendment was one that was offered by my colleague David Schweikert from Arizona last year, and it passed on a voice vote. The Department of Homeland Security, DHS, has long viewed state and local governments as valuable partners that can help serve a helpful role in assisting DHS in fulfilling its responsibilities with respect to immigration enforcement. And it continues to welcome that participation. In order to avoid complying with their obligation to share information with DHS, local governments have taken on a don't ask, don't tell policy known as sanctuary policies. With the implementation of sanctuary policies, state and local law enforcement officers are barred from asking people about their immigration status or reporting them to federal immigration authorities. Sanctuary policies are bad public policy because states or cities that institute sanctuary policies become magnets for illegal immigration. Illegal immigration results in higher costs of living, reduced job availability, lower wages, higher crime rates, fiscal hardship on hospitals, and substandard quality of care for residents, burdens on public services, increasing their costs and diminishing their availability, and a reduction of the overall quality of life. Sanctuary policies are expensive and shift the cost of illegal immigration onto citizens and legal immigrants. Because of the difficulty states have in collecting taxes from persons who are not lawfully present, many are utilizing state and local benefits and resources without contributing their fair share. Sanctuary policies serve as a perverse incentive for illegal alien families to move to those states or cities who institute such policies. Accommodating those who violate our immigration law encourages others to follow the same path and gives prospective immigrants little incentive to pursue the legal paths of immigration when they can sidestep the process and gain the same benefits. Sanctuary policies also insult those legal immigrants who patiently waited for months and years for the U.S. State Department and DHS to approve their application and paid thousands of dollars in travel, legal, and medical fees to abide by the entry, employment, health, and processing laws and regulations. Sanctuary policies conflict with federal law. Recognizing the adoption of sanctuary policies as a growing impediment to combating the wave of illegal aliens residing in the country, Congress adopted the Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigration Responsibility Act of 1996 that barred state and local governments from prohibiting employees from providing, receiving, and sharing information on those here illegally with federal government immigration officials. Sanctuary policy denies U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement with critical assistance to enable it to accomplish its statutorily mandated mission to identify and ultimately remove those here illegally who are currently in state or local custody. Sanctuary policies undermine national security efforts and create an environment in which terrorists and individuals of national security concern go unnoticed and uninterrupted. Sanctuary cities tell those who are here illegally that our laws of our country don't matter. Sanctuary city policies encourage illegal immigration and weaken our nation's ability to secure our borders. They contribute to a flood of illegal immigrants in this country today. During the immigration reform debate, sanctuary cities should not be overlooked. This policy has created an even bigger illegal immigration problem. With money so tight these days, cities which are purposely skirting federal law should not benefit from federal law enforcement funding. The funds should be used for those cities who are actively enforcing the law. So in a nutshell, what this amendment would do would disallow any funds from this particular legislation to go to sanctuary cities. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Texas, rise.
I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
We will accept this amendment.
Gentleman yields back.
Yield back.
Question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Arizona.
Mr. Chairman,
I'm sorry?
I move to strike the last word.
Gentlelady from Texas is recognized for 5 minutes.
I'm not sure of the full intent of the gentleman's amendment, but I will say that I'm concerned if we are going to deny funding to cities that have established rules that may be determined that they are sanctuary cities, and in fact they are not. Many cities have a process in their own jurisdiction where law enforcement wants to ensure that in the enforcement of their local laws that all communities be considered engaged in the law enforcement process. I don't know whether the gentleman determines that that is a sanctuary city where chiefs of police wish to hear from communities that are bilingual and therefore do not want to have a structure that intimidates them and therefore inhibits the prosecution of laws or inhibits the elimination of crime. So I would only make the argument that I know that the Chiefs of Police, Association of Chiefs of Police, have argued that it is important to ensure that immigrant communities feel free enough to communicate with their law enforcement officers. I don't know if that is the interpretation of the gentleman's sanctuary cities. I know that he is going under the law, but I certainly hope those cities will not be biased or discriminated against with respect to federal funding on homeland security, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back.
I'll be happy to yield to the gentleman.
The gentlelady yields back, but the gentleman from Arizona seeks recognition.
I was just going to say, my interpretation of the law is exactly as it's stated in the law that we passed in 1996, and nothing more, nothing less.
Gentleman yields back. What purpose does the gentleman from Arizona rise?
Move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, being someone who worked on this amendment last year, and I appreciate my next-door neighbor and my old friend Matt Salmon for bringing it up, for those of us from Arizona, we actually have some very intimate experience with sort of dealing with these mechanics. For almost all of us in this body, we run for office telling everyone that immigration is a federal issue. You know, we need to set federal policy. You know, and that's how we mechanically will come up with our commonality of enforcement. But what happens when all of a sudden we have a municipality that's still taking those federal dollars and yet is not playing under the same rules as their next-door neighbor municipalities? The beauty of this amendment is very, very simple. It says if you're going to take these resources, you need to play by the rule book that we in Congress set on an issue that we're supposed to be dominant on. And the reality of it is when you have a municipality that through stated policy flaunts what we're trying to do, particularly in immigration policy, it ends up creating this sort of balkanization in our communities, and it sets off those very fights that I believe our last speaker was touching on. And having been the county treasurer of Maricopa County, I've seen the edges of this when one municipality was looking very, very different at our federal laws compared to another one, and literally the movements that would happen with populations and the fights that would start, and also the chaos that would actually create when you were trying to have a community of also equal law enforcement. So, Mr. Chairman, that's one of the reasons I stand here and support the Salmon Amendment, and with that I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. What purpose does the gentlelady from California rise?
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last word.
The gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I rise today in the hopes of engaging in a colloquy with the chairman. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the work that you have done on this bill along with our ranking member. I had intended to offer an amendment in the hopes that we could move forward with modernizing our pedestrian access at our land ports of entry, but I was held up in the NDAA markup, which is ongoing still. My amendment would have been simple. It would have set aside $5 million within the Construction and Facilities Management account in Title II of this bill to begin construction on shovel-ready projects at our land ports of entry, the pedestrian access points. Mr. Chairman, our land ports are out of date and in need of massive repair. This is the first step in addressing the massive wait times for pedestrians across our country. I was recently in Calexico, California, where I saw elderly people waiting in 102-degree heat just to come and shop in the United States. We hinder our economy when we hinder the lifeline of trade into our country. Mr. Chairman, this is happening every day at our border communities throughout this country. And as a member of Congress from a border state, you understand that all too well. So I want to ask the Chairman for his support in working with me during the conference to ensure pedestrian access points at land points of entry have the funds that they need to be improved so that we can increase our trade at our land points.
Will the gentlelady yield?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I will.
I thank the gentlewoman from California for engaging me in this colloquy. As she has just stated, wait times at our ports of entry, both vehicle and pedestrian, have increased in recent years. I would have supported the gentlewoman's amendment, but I will vow to work with her in ensuring that the proper funds are given to the pedestrians to reduce the wait times at port of entry. And I'll be glad to work with you on this issue. And I'll yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for that clarification and for your strong support in improving pedestrian access points at our land points of entry. And I yield back my time.
Gentlelady yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Arizona. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. What purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey rise?
Mr. Chair, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Runyon of New Jersey. At the end of the bill, before the short title, insert the following new section. Section, none of the funds made available in this act may be used to carry out the amendments made by Section 100207 of the Biggert Waters Flood Insurance Reform Act of 2012, Title II of Division F of Public Law 112-141, with respect to any property located in the state of New Jersey or the state of New York.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the chair, and my amendment is actually very similar to what Representative Cassidy had on the floor about an hour ago. My amendment would delay the increase in National Flood Insurance Program premiums in New Jersey and New York until the end of FY14. It does through prohibiting funding for the implementation of Section 207 of the Biggert Waters Flood Insurance Reform Act with regards to the states of New York and New Jersey. New Jersey and New York have suffered unprecedented damages during Hurricane Sandy. Many of these coastal residents in New Jersey and New York are still struggling to rebuild, and now we're staring down huge increases in flood insurance premiums due to the provisions of the Biggert Waters Act. The people of New Jersey and New York have suffered enough and cannot afford to pay skyrocketing premiums in the middle of the rebuilding process. The least we can do is give them a reprieve, a little peace of mind until the end of the 2014 fiscal year. I'd like to thank Mr. King and Mr. Lubiando for working with me on this amendment, and I urge my colleagues to support the amendment. I yield back the balance of my time.
Question is on the amendment offered. What purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
Move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
The authorizers have indicated that they oppose this amendment that's being proposed by my friend from New Jersey, and I'm reluctant to oppose it. So I just wanted to make that statement that the authorizing committee is opposed to this. We've had a debate almost ad nauseum on the state of the Louisiana with exactly the same amendment, and I think everything that's been said about this flood program has been said, so I'm not going to continue that debate. I just wanted to make a note that although I'm not going to officially oppose, I will state that the authorizers were supposed to be here to oppose. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. What purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I want to thank the chair and the ranking member of this subcommittee for their work on this bill. It's certainly one that I'm very happy to support. Given the importance of trade at both our northern and southern land ports of entry, I am particularly pleased that the bill includes 1,600 new CBP officers to expedite trade at our ports. I had planned to offer an amendment that would have helped to target these new officers to the busiest ports of entry. It would have required the Department of Homeland Security to submit a report detailing the average crossing times at the busiest land ports and what the staffing needs are to ensure that we can reduce those wait times to 20 minutes or less. I understand my amendment would be subject to a point of order, but I look forward to working with the chair and the ranking member to address this issue as the process moves forward. And very quickly, wait times right now at our ports of entry are unpredictable and they are inconsistent. People can wait as few as 20 minutes. They can wait as long as 2 or 3 hours to enter the United States at a pedestrian bridge, as a commuter by vehicle, or most importantly for our economy, trade can wait hours at a time to enter the United States. The economy that I represent in El Paso, Texas has 100,000 jobs at stake that depend on this cross-border trade. There is over $90 billion in U.S.-Mexico trade that is crossing at those ports every single year. More than 6 million jobs in this country depend on that U.S.-Mexico trade that is crossing at our southern ports of entry alone. In the state of Texas, we have more than 400,000 jobs. In the state of North Carolina, we have over 100,000 jobs. That's why I think it's so important to understand the wait times, to be able to fix them, and to move people and CBP officers where they are most needed. And so, again, I look forward to working with the chairman and the ranking member to address this issue going forward. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
Move to strike the last word. I'd just like to
gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
like to comment to my colleague from Brownsville. We in Texas are very proud of our ports of entry on the border. They do an exceptional job in a difficult environment. We do need to reduce the wait times, and I'm looking forward to working with you. I'm looking forward to coming to Brownsville and visiting down that way. I've been to Laredo a bunch of times lately, but I haven't been to Brownsville, and I will get down that way. And I intend to work with you and with our friends from California and Arizona to do the best we can to move these wait times down to something that's manageable. So I just want to comment. I'd be glad to work with you. Yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For purpose does the gentleman from Georgia rise?
Strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'd like to address Mr. Runyon's amendment with the flood insurance. You know, we've had a great discussion on this tonight about the flood insurance and how appropriate it is to come through an appropriations bill rather than going through regular order and going through the Committee of Origination, which is the Financial Services Committee. So I don't want to take up any more time. I mean, we have been through this and through this and through this, and with all respect to the gentleman from New Jersey, I just don't know that it's proper to do something specific for just 2 states when there's other states where anybody that 5.5 million people that have flood insurance are involved in this. And so I would just ask for a no vote on this amendment, and that we could give the Committee of Authority the ability to address the FEMA situation. With that, I ask for a no vote, and I yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back. Question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from New Jersey. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to.
Mr. Chair,
Gentleman.
request a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from New Jersey will be postponed. For purpose does the gentlelady from Texas rise?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk regarding air marshals.
This one here.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Ms. Jackson Lee of Texas. At the end of the bill, before the short title, insert the following section. None of the funds made available in this act may be used in contravention of Section 44917 of Title 49 United States Code.
Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Again, let me thank the committee for its leadership and acknowledge to my friends that this amendment was adopted in the last appropriation for Homeland Security, and I believe it's an important amendment to continue to keep before this committee, but also to continue to provide codification of it. I have served on the Homeland Security Committee for a very honorable period of time, and when I say that, it is a time that I have enjoyed being able to address the questions of Homeland Security or domestic security under the Homeland Security Department. Through that time, I've had the privilege of one of my committees to have oversight over the U.S. Air Marshals. And I would offer to say to my colleagues that often U.S. Air Marshals don't get the thanks and appreciation that they deserve. It is not an easy task, even as they are on domestic flights. International flights are quite difficult in terms of the time, but also the intensity of the work, because their astuteness and awareness of what's going on in a small, compact area is very important to the safety of those passengers. So my amendment, Mr. Chairman, is very simple. And what it does is it asks that no funds be used to limit the discretion of the Secretary of Homeland Security to enhance the use of federal air marshals on inbound international flights considered to be high risk by the Department of Homeland Security. There's little that I need to say to my colleagues is that we live in a different atmosphere and certainly a different neighborhood. We're all well aware of our eyes being focused on the Christmas Day bomber just a few years ago, or in fact the shoe bomber that was headed to Boston, or the fact of the various training that is going on with individuals even from the United States in Yemen. We're also aware that one of the Boston massacre bombings, marathon bombings, flew from the United States overseas and back. So we realize that individuals are using the international skies, if you will, to travel back and forth to the United States. My amendment ensures that the federal air marshals are effectively using their funds to deploy personnel on inbound flights that are considered high risk by the Department of Homeland Security, and that there's no limitation to that ability. I believe that federal air marshals are the last line of defense in many instances in defending the cockpit and aircraft cabin against terrorist attacks, those who have obviously been able to transcend other barriers in getting on planes in international ports. As a former chair and a current member of the Homeland Security Transportation Security Committee, I've worked over the years and sponsored legislation to ensure that we have enough air marshals, that they receive all the requisite training to effectively secure the aircraft. Again, many times their work goes unnoticed, but it is vital work. To best protect our nation from terroristic threat, it is of extreme importance that we use the necessary funds to support the use of federal air marshals on inbound international flights. Make no mistake, the threat to our aviation system from aircraft inbound to the United States from foreign airports continues to be a serious and dangerous threat. It is often recited by those who are engaged in intelligence matters that aviation assets still are the asset of choice for many of these franchise terrorists. To best protect our nation from terroristic threat, it is important that we take note of our international flights. Following the capture and killing of Osama bin Laden, intelligence was gathered that suggests that al-Qaeda still has an interest in attacking the United States, likely through transportation modes, whether it is to airplanes, trains, and other modes. This fact, coupled with the numerous suspicious activities, even on domestic aircraft where passengers are attempting to open cabin doors in flight or otherwise disrupt, is of concern. And certainly, our air marshals play a very important role. While my amendment deals with the threat on inbound aircraft to the United States, its ultimate impact will be to ensure that air marshals are assigned to the highest risk flights. It simply prohibits funds from being used to limit the discretion of the Secretary of Homeland Security to enhance air marshal coverage on inbound high-risk flights, and it reinforces the importance of the job that air marshals do, but also the importance of assessing this high-risk threat in many instances, which is the aviation vehicle. The terroristic threats are ever-changing. We must allow the Secretary of Homeland Security to make the necessary adjustments to protect the American people. This is not a funding issue or a people issue, rather a security issue, and this amendment is budget neutral, and I would ask my colleagues to support this amendment that really speaks to the idea of security for the American people.
Gentlelady's time has expired. For purposes, the gentleman from Texas rise.
Move to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I do not oppose this young lady's amendment. It's my understanding that it's a restatement of current law. Yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Question is on the amendment offered by the gentlelady from Texas. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. For purposes, the gentleman from Georgia rise.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Gingrey of Georgia. At the end of the bill, before the short title, insert the following section. None of the funds made available by this act may be used in contravention of Section 287G of the Immigration and Nationality Act, 8 United States Code 1357G.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I rise today to offer a common sense amendment to H.R. 2217. The 287G program has been an integral component of immigration enforcement efforts, yet the Obama administration has been systematically weakening the integrity of the program by slashing funding and discontinuing numerous agreements. Our colleagues on the other side of the aisle have tried to do the same throughout this open amendment process. Mr. Chairman, I want to commend my friend, Homeland Security Appropriations Subcommittee Chairman Judge John Carter, for recognizing the importance of the program and ensuring that the underlying bill provide $43.5 million to restore it. My amendment simply adds an additional layer of protection for the program by stating that none of the funds made available under this act may be used in contravention of Section 287G of the Immigration and Nationality Act. The 287G program enables state and local law enforcement to enter into agreements with Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, to act in place of or in tandem with ICE agents by processing illegal aliens who are incarcerated for crimes for removal. 287G agreements have a proven track record, Mr. Chairman. Since 2006, over 309,000 potentially removable illegal aliens have been identified under this enforcement program. I emphasize potentially removable because the final decision remains with ICE. Additionally, with less than 6,000 ICE agents, 287G agreements serve as a critical force multiplier by allowing state and local enforcement to insist in enforcing federal immigration laws. In my district, the 11th Congressional District of Georgia, the Cobb County Sheriff's Department has successfully participated in the 287G program since 2007. I know that the Cobb Sheriff's Department wants to continue its participation in this program, and I am sure countless other law enforcement agents do as well. However, the Obama administration continues to weaken our immigration laws by reducing options available to enforce those laws. The administration has gone so far as discontinuing existing agreements, suspending pending agreements, and seeking to slash the 287G program by 25%. We cannot let this continue. Mr. Chairman, the administration and my colleagues on the other side of the aisle tout secure communities as an alternative to 287G. While secure communities is an important part of immigration enforcement, it focuses primarily on removing aliens that the administration deems a priority, namely criminal aliens. While removal of these types of aliens is important, the administration must stop picking and choosing aspects of existing immigration law it chooses to enforce. State and local enforcement officers go through extensive training to participate in 287G agreements. The training allows them to participate in enforcing immigration law while carrying out their other duties. rather than turning a blind eye to someone here illegally, officers are able to identify and take action when they encounter an illegal alien who has been incarcerated for committing a crime. They're not patrolling the streets. The Obama administration's continued attack on the 287G program ignores the success and the officers' training, assuming that they can't multitask, assuming that instead forces those who are charged with upholding the law to just simply ignore it. Mr. Chairman, it's time we start enforcing our immigration laws. It's time we uphold the rule of law. For these reasons, I urge all of my colleagues, please support my amendment to this bill, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For purposes, gentleman, text rise.
Mr. Chairman, move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I rise in support of the Gingrey amendment. I will yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For purposes, gentleman from North Carolina.
Chairman, I move to strike the last words.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I am mainly baffled by this amendment. What on earth could it mean to contravene 287G? Nobody wants to contravene any federal statute. That's what this amendment says. If the offering of this amendment is an occasion to gloss over the problems with 287G and tout its virtues, I will simply very briefly go back to the debate earlier today, when I think this was pretty thoroughly discussed. We have in 287G an effort to bring local officials into the business of immigration enforcement. In some communities that's worked reasonably well, and I must say, in my experience, where it's worked reasonably well has been where those local authorities focused on the jails and on the prison population and the people who in fact had committed serious crimes. And in that sense, it is a parallel effort with the Secure Communities effort. I know of other instances, though, and I think the Department has validated that or verified that there are other instances where that line between federal and local authority has gotten very seriously blurred, where there have been instances of profiling and other abuses. In fact, there have been so many abuses that I concluded some time ago that 287G was prone to abuse. That there were too many problems with the way that program was set up for it to really be our long-term effort to involve local officials in immigration matters. So I believe it's very important that 287G be phased into the Secure Communities effort. The Secure Communities effort is now taking off around the country, and I think can in time supersede this flawed 287G concept. And then finally, there's also the matter of expense. We discussed earlier today $32,000 per renewal, per removal for that task force model 287G program versus something like $1,500 under Secure Communities. It's a waste of money. And so therefore I thought the administration did the right thing in reducing the funding for 287G and continuing the phase-in of Secure Communities. And I regret that the committee put that money back, but I certainly feel that this current amendment, I don't understand what it means, but I certainly don't want to let the occasion pass without saying to my colleagues, I think this 287G program is one that we need to oversee very, very carefully. And I remain convinced that it can and should be superseded by a better program. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For purposes, gentleman, Texas rise.
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike last word.
Gentleman's recognized 5 minutes.
I yield the balance of my time to Mr. Gingrey from Georgia.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the gentleman from Texas for yielding me time. I just say to my colleague from North Carolina that, as I pointed out in describing this amendment, 287G program superseded some of these state laws that were enacted west of the Mississippi, not east of the Mississippi, and obviously there were some problems. In this situation that I'm describing, and the reason the chairman of the subcommittee wants so strongly to fund this program is that communities like Cobb County, Georgia, in the heart of the 11th Congressional District, my district, Sheriff Neil Warren, who has been utilizing this program since 2007, Mr. Chairman, and as I pointed out, it is a force multiplier. The deputy sheriffs in Cobb County are not patrolling the streets, profiling, looking for certain individuals to ask them for their papers or anything of that sort. This program is just simply when someone is incarcerated for committing a crime in our community, and it doesn't matter their ethnicity, anybody in that jail with the training of these officers under the 287G federal program, federally trained, they have the ability, the knowledge, the wherewithal to find out, to check the databases, the Homeland Security information, Social Security, to find out whether or not these individuals are in this country legally. Now, if they're not in the country legally, we make note of that. They make note of that under the 287G program. They serve their time for the crime they committed in our community, whether that's running a red light, driving under the influence of drugs or alcohol, a minor fender bender, whatever it is. They serve their time. ICE is then simply given this information, and they can make a decision whatever they want to do in regard to whether they deport these illegal immigrants. The Secure Communities program, of course, gives them the ability to decide not to deport them. Well, the local community, the local sheriff's department is out of it at that point. So nothing can be better than a program like 287G, and it's well worth the dollar spent, and as I point out, a force multiplier. So I commend the chairman of the subcommittee, and I say to my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, let's get the job done and support this amendment.
Gentleman yields back. What purpose does the gentlelady from Texas rise?
I rise to strike the last word.
The gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I was intending on offering an amendment dealing with border security centers of excellence. I will not offer that amendment, and I'd like to just indicate that I look forward to working with the ranking member and the chairman. As we move toward comprehensive immigration reform, border security centers of excellence are universities that look to the highest technology of how we can secure America. They undertake research and education initiatives designed to meet the needs of the Department of Homeland Security, border security, immigration in a global context. They develop and use cutting-edge research methodologies focused on unique science, technology, policy issues, and they develop educational programs in order to educate current and future practitioners, which is really crucial, and researchers in the relevant disciplines. If we want to secure America, we need the technology and the expertise. As a ranking member on the Border Security and Maritime Security, I can assure you that as we look to the new metrics of border security in the northern and southern border, we need personnel. And my amendment was going to ensure that we allow Congress to gather the information needed by Congress to establish more universities or opportunities for more universities and colleges to participate as border security centers of excellence. In my own community, Houston Community College, Texas Southern University, University of Houston, a number of campuses could be engaged as border security centers of excellence. Texas Southern University, for example, received from my initiative a transportation security center of excellence that was established under that particular legislation, the Transportation Security Administration legislation. So I would like to make sure that we look forward to doing that. And I will also add that I do want to indicate, as we pass the amendment dealing with no knives on planes, I'd introduced legislation with Mr. Grimm that allowed Administrator Pistol an indefinite amount of time to consult with stakeholders. I frankly believe that legislation helped turn the corner for the thoughtful position that Mr. Pistol has now taken. I think the legislation or the amendment that we passed today is by voice and was common sense and makes a good, important statement. I also think the idea of the emphasizing air marshals, my previous amendment that was accepted, is important to reinstate and to reemphasize the importance of U.S. air marshals and the importance of the responsibility of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security for the traveling public to ensure that it assesses high-risk places of departure so that air marshals can be used effectively, efficiently, and with funding. And so with all of that, I believe that the amendments that have been put on the floor today that we've discussed, that I've discussed and offered, contribute, I hope, positively to the ultimate direction of security in this country. And as well as I conclude, I hope that we'll be able to have more border security centers of excellence, and I look forward to working with this committee and the authorizing committee to ensure that in comprehensive immigration reform we have the technology, the personnel, the training, the research, the education to make it work as it should. With that, I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Georgia. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, proceedings will now resume on those amendments on which further proceedings were postponed. In the following order: amendment by Mr. Bishop of New York, amendment by Mr. Moran of Virginia, amendment by Mr. Garrett of New Jersey, amendment by Mr. Ryan of Ohio, amendment number 1 by Mr. Cassidy of Louisiana, amendment by Mr. Meadows of North Carolina, amendment number 4 by Mr. Thompson of Mississippi, amendment by Mr. Runyon of New Jersey. The chair will reduce to 2 minutes the time for any electronic vote after the first vote in the series. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on the amendment offered by the gentleman from New York, Mr. Bishop, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevail by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Bishop of New York.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of a request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 15-minute vote.
Another series of votes here in the House on amendments to the Homeland Security Bill. The overall bill includes $46 billion for the Homeland Security Department in fiscal 2014, with $5.5 billion of that for emergency disaster relief. The amendment that the House is voting on now, offered by Representative Bishop of New York, would eliminate all funding for the National Bio and Agro Defense Facility, which is estimated to cost $404 million. Here's more about that Homeland Security bill.
Tim Starks is with CQ Roll Call, joining us from Capitol Hill. What does this 2014 Homeland Security spending bill say about the priorities of House Republicans who wrote the bill?
I think it says that the Homeland Security is still one of the bigger of the priorities for the House Republicans. It's a $39 billion bill. It is something that the administration has complained while they are basically comfortable with the funding level, they don't like that it comes at the expense of domestic programs.
What are some of the specific programs and agencies funded by the Homeland Security bill overall?
The biggest ones are, say, the border security agencies, Customs and Border Protection, and Immigrations and Customs Enforcement. The Coast Guard is another very big one. Because of disaster aid, the Federal Emergency Management Agency is another of the biggest. And then from there, you start seeing the Transportation Security Administration, you start seeing Secret Service, and it gets a little smaller as they go down that way.
You said the bill's $39 billion. How does it take into account or deal with the automatic spending cuts, the sequestration cuts?
It does take them into account in the way that some of the other bills do so far. This bill would actually be above the current level, assuming sequestration is going in the past year as well. So it's a raise from last year based on what's happening with sequestration in the current fiscal year.
What about some of the hot-button issues that are coming up or likely to come up during the debate over the bill?
Well, you know, grant funding is always a pretty popular topic. I think we'll see something on that in a few different ways, actually. There are some programs that are controversial that we might see efforts to end funding for say, track illegal immigrants or that detect behavior in airports, because those are programs that Democrats have worried are making use of racial profiling. You know, the bill also bans funding for visa immigration applications from Brazil. You know, there might be an effort to end that. Those are some of the bigger issues in terms of things that we might see fights on. The other issues have kind of been resolved from the hot button issues have been things that the administration proposed that the Republicans said no to, things like an airport security fee increase or deeper cuts to the Coast Guard than Republicans were comfortable with.
What about Democrats broadly? What are some of their overall priorities in this spending bill?
You know, they've been reasonably happy with this bill because you know, it gets in the ballpark of what they would like the top line to be. Even though they, like the president, they share concerns that it's going to come at the expense of some other programs. You know, I think, like I mentioned, the grant programs are particularly popular with Democrats. You know, the Homeland Security grant programs, things like fire grants, firefighter grants, any kind of public safety agencies, and any grants they need for Homeland Security. And then some of those programs that have been a little controversial with Democrats as they pertain to civil liberties kind of concerns.
You mentioned White House displeasure over some elements in this House bill, this Republican bill. They've issued a veto threat. So what does the White House want to see out of the Senate bill? What do they want to see come out of Congress?
You know, there are some specific things that were put into this bill that are put into the bill pretty regularly. Things like efforts to make it harder for them to close the Guantanamo Bay detention facility that they're upset about. They want to see the Brazil language that I mentioned come out. They're upset that the Republicans keep putting back in language requiring a certain mandatory minimum number of detention beds for immigrants, illegal immigrants that have been captured. And you know, I think what they'll probably get some of what they want from the Senate, but you know, there's some Senate Democrats who feel similar about some of those programs that the House Republicans do. I think, you know, in terms of what the Senate might do that would be different, you know, there might be less funding for the facility in Kansas that would study agricultural diseases. There might be more funding still for the Coast Guard than even the Republicans put in to counteract what the president was proposing reducing.
Tim Starks is with CQ Roll Call. He's covering the debate in the House over Homeland Security spending. You can read more at rollcall.com. Thank you for the update, Tim Starks.
Thank you.
As the House continues voting on an amendment to the Homeland Security bill, a bit of news out tonight. The Boston Globe is reporting a story from Britain's Guardian newspaper that says the National Security Agency is collecting the telephone records of Verizon customers. According to The Guardian, a court order requires Verizon on an ongoing daily basis to give the NSA information on all telephone calls in its systems, both within the U.S. and between the U.S. and other countries. For much of the day, the House Armed Services Committee has debated amendments to the Defense Programs Bill for 2014. That markup is happening live right now on C-SPAN 2. The committee may take a break for these votes, but we'll have live coverage as long as the committee is in session until the end of the markup tonight. Again, that's on C-SPAN 2. Here's a few minutes of debate from the markup from earlier today on an amendment dealing with sexual assaults in the military.
Mr. Chairman, I too wanted to take a moment to talk about the sexual assault prevention provisions in the underlying bill, and thank you. Thank our Ranking Member Smith, thank Congressman Wilson and Congresswoman Davis for including these provisions in the bill. It has been a strong bipartisan effort working with Congressman Turner and so many others who have sought to address this issue over many years. But yesterday, the Senate Armed Services Committee held a hearing to address this widespread problem. The hearing was dominated by military leaders without one sexual assault survivor testifying. Of the 20 witnesses, only 2 were from advocacy organizations that fight for change. I do not doubt the commitment of our military leaders to eradicating the scourge of sexual assault in our ranks, and it is, of course, vitally important to hear their plan moving forward. But opinion and information from a variety of sources, especially those whose lives have been directly and often tragically impacted, is a vital part of changing this flawed culture. In recent months, we have seen reports rise, commanders and supervisors abuse their authority, and officers in charge of prevention efforts allegedly commit the crimes they swore to stop. This is clearly a systemic problem, and accountability is needed at every level from everyone, officer and enlisted alike. I am so proud that the members of this committee will not let the status quo stand. The military has obviously been able to solve this problem independently of congressional action. I believe our role is to provide the tools needed and make sure they're being used properly. A number of members have put forward proposals that aim to eradicate this crime. We are all moving in the same direction toward the same goal of reducing these horrific crimes. This bill takes important steps to address this issue. Congressman Turner has referenced many. It continues our push to provide victims of sexual assault access to legal counsel. This is a critical step in the process of creating an environment that encourages victims to report these crimes and in bringing those responsible to justice. An Air Force pilot program in just 4 months or 5 months of being in place saw over 300 survivors come forward and request this counsel to support them as they sought justice, and make sure that those who are convicted of sexual assault will be absolutely discharged or dismissed from military service so they can no longer remain in the service and prey upon future victims. And most importantly, it takes away the power of commanders to throw out the jury verdicts of those who have been convicted of sexual assault, a significant first step in constraining and challenging the commander's authority. There is much work still to be done, but this language is a step in the right direction, and I thank you for your support.
Gentlelady yields back. Are there any amendments to the subcommittee report? Excuse me. Ms. Spear, request time.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I want to thank...
Gentlelady's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to certainly celebrate with my colleagues the good faith effort by so many on this committee to try and stem what is a black stain on our military and, frankly, on our Congress. This is an issue that's been around for 25 years. There's been Tailhook, there's been Aberdeen, there's been the military academies. Recently there's been Lackland Air Force Base, SAPRO officers, another Naval Academy scandal, and the list goes on and on. For all of our good intentions, nothing will change unless there is a concerted effort for more prosecutions. Last year, there were 26,000 cases of sexual assault and rape. There were 3,600 reported cases, and of the 3,600 reported cases, only 191 resulted in convictions. If there's no convictions, there is no discharge dishonorably from the military. As long as the chain of command continues to allow for the decisions to be made by the chain and through the chain, decisions will be made not to prosecute, decisions will be made to offer non-judicial punishment instead of prosecutions and convictions. And as long as we continue to have restrictive reporting of these crimes, those sexual predators will continue to be able to roam and continue to prey on other victims as well. So I applaud this effort. It is a very positive step, but nothing is going to change, Mr. Chairman and colleagues, unless we deal with the issue of chain of command. And to the Senate Armed Services Committee, they had the guts yesterday to bring in all of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and to hold a hearing precisely on the issue of chain of command. We have yet to do this, and I hope at some point in the near future we will. I yield back.
That was from the House Armed Services Committee marking up the Defense Programs Bill for fiscal 2014. Here's a little bit more about that legislation. It includes $552 billion in spending for national defense and an additional $86 billion for overseas operations. As this vote continues, here's more debate from the markup from earlier today, this one dealing with base closings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This amendment goes to one of the comments that Ms. Bordala mentioned in her comments. While this mark prohibits a BRAC for this year, I believe for the next couple of years, and though I disagree with that, I won't oppose that decision. It goes even further than that, and it prohibits the Department of Defense from planning or proposing an additional BRAC round. And that's just bad legislation. I mean, the executive branch has its role, the legislative branch has its role. If the executive branch wishes to propose something, we can oppose it. We can have a debate and discussion about it. But to go so far in our mark as to prohibit the Department of Defense from planning or proposing an additional BRAC round just doesn't make any sense to me. You know, I think there were many on the Republican side of the aisle that were very critical of the Department of Defense for not planning for sequestration, for saying, well, we don't think it's going to happen, so we're not going to plan for it. I think it's a pretty fair criticism. I mean, you've got to plan for what's coming. And to say that they can't plan or propose in the future, I think is an unnecessary restriction. And it also goes back to the larger point that I made at the beginning in my opening comments, and I will disagree with the chairman slightly. While this mark reflects the House budget resolution, and the House budget resolution has a significantly higher defense number than the Senate budget resolution, and that's a basic disagreement because obviously the Senate budget resolution has a much higher number for other programs, for the other 11 appropriations bills, and we can work our way through that. Neither of those budget resolutions, and not this bill either, considers sequestration. Considers that in FY 2014, which is what we're marking up here, sequestration is most likely to happen. There's no pathway out of it. I mean, you know, how many Republicans over here are going to support a tax increase between now and October 1st? I won't ask for a show of hands. You know, how many Democrats in the Senate and the White House are going to accept straight mandatory spending cuts as a way out of sequestration? Not enough. I mean, that's been our basic block since way back in July of 2011 that led to sequestration in the first place, and nothing has changed. It's coming, and we continue to act like it's not, and further restricting the department's ability to plan and try to figure out how to deal with it just doesn't make sense. Now, I understand in many instances in the short term, BRAC can be more expensive, but in the long term, by the long term, 3, 4, 5 years, it begins to save money. And sequestration's a 9-year deal. So we're looking at a longer period of time here. And the final point I'll make is we've gotten to the point on this committee, and I won't quote the specifics, but, you know, Senator McCain in our conference last year was flabbergasted by being in some state somewhere where they were proposing moving, I think it was 5 C-130s out of the state, and everybody pretty much came unglued. We can't do that. I mean, I've had stuff, you know, moved out of my district, moved into my district too, but you don't stand up every time and say, DOD, the one and only rule is my district can't be reduced by anything, because we wind up paralyzing them. Now, when times are flush, when we were doubling the budget over the course of 10 years, we had a little play and we could do that. But now with the cuts that have already come, as the chairman continues to mention, the $487 billion in cuts that have been put in place, and sequestration from FY13 now being a fact of life, and sequestration in FY14, unless someone wants to argue with me about what's going to happen there. With all of that happening, I don't think this committee has the luxury of being so darn parochial anymore. To say every single time any one of the services comes into our state and says, look, we got to rearrange, that we're going to fight tooth and nail to stop them. And I guess this is just the logical extreme of that, to say that, you know, you can't even think about it. We don't know what it is, but don't you dare think about it. Don't you dare think about moving anything out of one base or another. So I would urge us at a minimum to strike that language that prohibits them from even planning or proposing additional BRAC rounds. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose? Gentleman from Virginia requests time.
Mr. Chairman, I want to be held on record as speaking in adamant opposition to the
Gentleman is
amendment.
recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, if you look at the process of BRAC, planning and proposing is the process. Implementation is the end product of that. So if we're going to say, well, we're going to plan and propose a BRAC, to me, that's the process. And if you look at the other elements of planning that are being undertaken right now that look at where we're going, that is, what is the strategy? You have the Secretary of Defense that's doing a strategic choice and management review. You have the QDR, and then you also have an independent review being done by this committee. If we're going to do planning, planning is putting together information to achieve an objective. If we don't know what the objective is, why in the world would we want to continue to go down the road to plan and propose a BRAC? It doesn't make any sense, in addition to the uncertainties that are out there with the drawdown of forces in Afghanistan, with the end strength reductions, additional to this in that realm of uncertainty. If you look at that, too, the costs. There is cost and time associated with doing the planning and proposing for a BRAC. My question is this: if we are focused on making best use of time and resources, is time and resources best spent to propose and plan with information that ultimately is going to be useless because the objectives may change, the strategy may change, and we're doing all of that now, putting the cart before the horse. So my look at this is that this is not the right thing being done to propose this amendment at this time, nor is it the right direction. And I feel very strongly that we need to make sure that we understand all the other different moving pieces that are about us now, whether it's the sequestration, whether it's planning on this nation's strategy, whether it's the drawdown in Afghanistan, whether it's end strength, to go forward and say somehow we're going to put together and plan and propose a BRAC and then not call it a BRAC, to me is foolishness, and it's not the right time nor the right place to do this. And again, I stand in strong objection to the amendment and yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose? The gentleman from California, Mr. Garamendi, requests time.
To speak in support of the amendment.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The ranking member laid out a very sound argument for being prepared, for understanding the options that we will have to face and the choices that we'll have to make. To be ignorant is never wise, and we rely heavily upon the Department of Defense to provide us with information. In this case, about the challenges that we face as a committee and as representatives of the American people on the choices with regard to the military So what the ranking member wants to do here is to simply give the military the opportunity, the Department of Defense, the opportunity and the responsibility to continue to think through, to plan, and to prepare options for us to consider. I think that's wise, and I think the ranking member's amendment allows the Department of Defense to do that and to provide us with the information that we will ultimately need to make some very tough decisions in the question of how we use the taxpayers' resources. So I support the ranking member.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Forbes, request time?
Move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'd like to join the distinguished chairman of the Readiness Subcommittee and his objections to this amendment. I have enormous respect for the ranking member, and I hear consistently talk about the need to raise taxes, and also the need to plan because of additional resources we'll need. I just wish, and I've outlined this before, that we had that kind of planning and discussion before we spent $833 billion on a stimulus bill and then $347 billion of interest on that, all of which is almost the exact overlay of what we're now cutting out of defense. And we pleaded and pleaded and pleaded when our friends on the other side of the aisle were in the majority, please don't do that because it's going to come out of the back of the fence. Well, we're harvesting what we planted. The second thing is the distinguished ranking member mentioned that we protect spending programs because we like them. Well, there are some members maybe who do that, but most of us try to protect these defense programs not because we like them, but because we need them. And when you look at the Pentagon, they are not coming over here and saying we don't need these force structures. They're saying because of the budgets we're given, we can't have them. And we've got to go back to a point in time on this committee where we're asking what does the United States need to defend this country, not just what we can afford, but what's the risk to the United States of America if we don't supply those resources. And the chairman of the Readiness Committee is exactly correct when he says this: if you believe that these force structures are the right force structures, that we need to reduce the Army where we're reducing it, if you believe that we need to reduce the Marine Corps where we're reducing it, if you believe that we ought to reduce the Air Force where we're going to reduce them, if you believe we ought to reduce the number of ships we've got in our Navy, then you should vote for BRAC, because once we put the BRAC in place, you'll never be able to build those force structures up again. But if you believe, as many of us do, that these force structures are headed in the wrong direction, the curve lines are headed in the wrong directions, then we need to be very, very careful about having another round of BRAC that locks us into those force structures. And that's why the other thing I would close with is what the chairman of the subcommittee said, that in the Pentagon, planning is the process. Once they start the planning, it starts in motion, those things, and you don't turn them around. And that's why it's important that I think we stay with the subcommittee recommendations and we reject this amendment. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Kaufman, seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I seek recognition in support of the amendment.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Speaker, Mr. Chairman, you know, every dollar wasted is not in the defense budget is not a dollar spent in defending this country. And I think what Mr. Smith is trying to do is merely give the authority to the Department of Defense to determine what the excess capacity is in military installations across this country, so we can make a decision as to what the trade-offs are. By not supporting the amendment, what we're saying is we don't even want to know. We don't want the Pentagon to even make the determination as to what the excess capacity is. We had testimony in this committee from the Secretary of the Army, who said that in 2004 it was the last time that they studied the issue, and the excess capacity was determined to be 20% in Army installations in the continental United States. Now, he speculated that the number was much greater now, but that successive NDAAs is prohibited from finding it out. We've got to at least know what the number is so we can have an intelligent debate in this committee. So I rise in strong support of the Smith Amendment. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentlelady from South Dakota, Ms. Nome, request time?
to strike the last word and speak in opposition to the amendment.
Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was proud to vote with my colleagues on the Readiness Subcommittee to support the Section 2711. There's no doubt that our country is facing serious fiscal challenges, but if you look at the 2005 bracket, it sets the perfect example for why this amendment should not be pursued at this point in time. The 2005 bracket cost more than $35 billion. It was a 67% increase over the original estimated costs. According to the recent report that the GAO put out, they said that the BRAC actually cost more than what the savings were going to be in the long run. In fact, they categorized it as excessive. Now, I know it's our responsibility to save dollars, but if recent results prove true, proposing and going after and planning for BRAC is not a good way to do that when it's a significant upfront costs and there's going to be questionable savings in the long run.
Nays are 345. The chair announces to the House the amendment is not passed. The chair announces to the House that 2-minute voting will occur after this vote, and the chair asks that members pay attention because the votes will close quickly for the rest of the evening. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Moran, on which further proceedings were postponed, on which noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Moran of Virginia.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
Seven more amendment votes here in the House, including this one offered by Congressman Moran. It deals